Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is May 25th. On this day in 2020, a cell phone video captured something that the world couldn't ignore. A Minneapolis police officer pressing his knee into the neck of George Floyd for over 9 agonizing minutes. George's final words, "I can't breathe," echoed beyond the street where he died. They sparked a global outcry for justice and accountability. Today, we remember George Floyd, not just the tragedy of his death, but the life he lived, the impact he had, and the movement that rose in his name. Let's get started. George Perry Floyd Jr. was born on October 14, 1973 in Fayetteville, North Carolina. After his parents separated, his mother moved the family to Houston's 3rd Ward, a historically black neighborhood known for its resilience and its struggles. They lived in the Cooney Homes housing project where George, who was known to his family as Perry or Big Floyd, grew up. He was tall, 6'4", and he used his height to his advantage. In high school, he played football and basketball and helped lead Jack Yates High to the state championships in 1992. But even off the field, George stood out for his kindness and his easygoing spirit. After a brief stint in college on a football scholarship, George returned to Houston. In the late 90s and early 2000s, he became a part of the local rap scene, performing with DJ Screw's Screwed Up Clique under the name Big Floyd. His lyrics often reflected his real-life experiences. They were hard, but honest. Like many men in his community, George faced challenges with the law. Between 1997 and 2005, he had several arrests, mostly related to drugs and theft. In 2007, he was convicted of aggravated robbery and served 4 years in prison. But after his release, George made a conscious effort to turn things around. He got involved in church and mentored young men while focusing on rebuilding his life. In 2014, he moved to Minneapolis hoping for a fresh start. He took a job as a truck driver and later as a security guard. He was doing his best. He was working and staying positive. But like millions of Americans, the pandemic in early 2020 left him unemployed and struggling to stay afloat. Still, friends remember him as the guy who made people laugh, who danced at barbecues, and who looked out for others. He was a man who was trying to do better. And then everything fell apart with a phone call. On the evening of May 25th, 2020, staff at Cup Foods, a neighborhood convenience store, reported that a man had used a counterfeit $20 bill to buy cigarettes. That man was George Floyd. Minneapolis police officers Thomas Lane and J. Alexander Kung arrived first. They found George sitting in a parked car outside with 2 other people. The officers approached him, pulled him out of the car, and handcuffed him. George, who was already anxious, told them he was claustrophobic and pleaded to not be put in the back of the car. Moments later, officers Derek Chauvin and Tu Tao arrived. What happened next was recorded by a 17-year-old bystander named Darnella Frazier. Her cell phone video would go on to shock the world. As George lay handcuffed and face down on the pavement, Chauvin placed his knee on George's neck, and he didn't move. Over the next 9 minutes and 29 seconds, George begged. He cried. He told them over and over again that he couldn't breathe. He said, "I can't breathe. Please. I'm about to die. Mama." Those are all things that he called out as his life was slipping away from him. Bystanders begged the officers to stop. One woman, who was an off-duty firefighter, asked to check George's pulse. Tao held the crowd back. The other officers said nothing. Eventually, George fell silent and he stopped moving. When paramedics finally arrived, George Floyd was unresponsive. He was pronounced dead shortly after at Hennepin County Medical Center. The video, though, that spread like wildfire. Within hours, millions of people had seen it. Within days, George Floyd's name was being chanted in cities across America and around the world. Protests erupted in all 50 U.S. states. Crowds gathered in London, Paris, Nairobi, and Tokyo. Streets filled with signs that read "Justice for George Floyd," "Say his name," and "Black Lives Matter." And Minneapolis burned. Protesters set fire to the 3rd Precinct police station. But amid the flames and the fury, there were also vigils, marches, and moments of silence. "I Can't Breathe" became a rallying cry because it wasn't the first time that those words had been said by a dying Black man at the hands of police. This time, people demanded change. The 4 officers involved were fired the day after George's death. But justice would take time. Derek Chauvin, the man who knelt on George's neck, was charged with murder and manslaughter. In April 2021, after a trial that gripped the nation, he was found guilty on all counts: 2nd-degree unintentional murder, 3rd-degree murder, and 2nd-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to 22 and a half years in prison. Later that year, Chauvin also pleaded guilty to federal charges of violating George Floyd's civil rights and received a concurrent 21-year federal prison sentence. Thomas Lane pleaded guilty in 2022 to aiding and abetting 2nd-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to 3 years and served a concurrent 2.5-year federal sentence. He was released from custody in February of 2024. J. Alexander King pleaded guilty in October 2022 to the same charge and was sentenced to 3.5 years, alongside a 3-year federal term. He was released in January 2025. Tou Thao, who stood between the crowd and Chauvin, was found guilty in May 2023 and sentenced to 4 years and 9 months. As of this recording, he remains incarcerated. As of today, the 5th anniversary of George Floyd's death, his legacy continues to evolve, and not without controversy. In November 2023, Derek Chauvin was stabbed by another inmate at a federal prison in Arizona. He survived and was transferred to a prison in Texas. More recently, there have been rumors of a potential federal pardon. Allies like Marjorie Taylor Greene have publicly supported this idea. But Minnesota officials, including Governor Tim Walz, have emphasized that a federal pardon would not override Chauvin's state conviction. And that is really important to remember. The president can pardon federal prison sentences, and in this case, Chauvin's is running concurrently, so it didn't actually add any time onto his state sentence. So Trump can pardon him all he wants, but it doesn't mean that he's getting out of prison or even getting out of prison any earlier. He will still serve his 22-year state sentence. Unfortunately, though, the news isn't all good. On the federal level, the Justice Department under the Trump administration announced this month that it would end consent decrees with police departments in Minneapolis and Louisville, agreements that were originally put into place to reform police practices after the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, whose case I've also covered on this podcast. Civil rights groups have condemned the move, calling it a step backward. And in Houston's 3rd Ward, where George grew up, a mural in his honor was recently demolished. Officials say it was about redevelopment, but to many, it felt like something deeper. It felt like erasure. George Floyd didn't wake up on May 25th, 2020, expecting to change the world. He was a man trying to live, trying to breathe. His murder exposed the deadly consequences of systemic racism and excessive force. It sparked a global movement. And though the momentum has slowed, the impact remains. Today, we say his name not just to remember his death, but to affirm the value of his life, to commit ourselves to a future where justice, dignity, and accountability aren't just ideals, they're reality. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found George's story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!